Yeah.
Gloria has texted me saying that she's running a little bit late. We checked on public comments and there are none. I'll let you entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated of January 6th of 2020.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion carried. Thank you. And today we're going to have a presentation on Opportunity Youth and micro school updates. We are going to run the entire presentation, so as you are having questions or comments, please take notes. At the end, Paris and his team will answer additional questions. I know that there were some questions sent ahead of time, so I appreciate that. But today what we're going to do is really high level understanding where we are now, but also looking a little bit of the historical chronological aspect, the work that started with Ricardo. And we're going to be looking at the data and also what is the thinking from the staff around next steps. So are you ready to take it on?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's do it.
As Ananda said, my name is Paris Eccles. I am the director of the Office of Youth Re-Engagement. And just a little bit, she also mentioned Ricardo Hara, thinking about our office. This is our second year operating within the district. So I just want to publicly thank, as I see all the people that are here to support the work that we're doing and thinking about what it takes to actually launch any new work, but doing the work that we're doing in 2 years, given the population that we are here serving, to be leading this work. But I also know that I could not do it without all the folks who are here on board, as well as who may not be here, but support the work that the Office of Youth Re-Engagement is actually doing to support our Opportunity Youth. Before going forward, I just want to make sure we as part of our mission and our work is affecting lives, building narratives, and changing futures. Thinking from a standpoint of how brilliant all the students that we serve are, and not deficit thinking. We're trying to impact their lives in ways to support where they want to go, build on the narrative that they already have, and they're trying to actually continue doing, and then ultimately changing the futures based on what it is they want to do, where they want to go, and who they want to become down the road. Presentation objectives. Who we serve. I was having a conversation a little bit before this actual presentation tonight with one of the staff members that will come up later, as well as a student. And one thing that we mentioned and talked about that we want to discuss is that when you think about the students that we serve and Opportunity Youth, it's not just 3 buckets of students. And one thing, the last bullet that's talking about youth entering 10th, 11th, and 12th grade who are severely undercredited and off track to our graduation. If we don't step in and be able to find ways to impact outcomes for them, they can slowly become youth who have dropped out or at risk of dropping out, and then find themselves in the justice system. So really thinking about the impact that the programming coordinator, Megan Buckner, is doing, thinking about with the programs of youth who are off track. Will Glenn, our out-of-school youth coordinator, who's not just solely focusing on youth who are already dropped out, but thinking about the programs that we have that are in place and trying to make sure students who are engaged in those programs stay in those programs. And we're working with our community partners. If students are not showing up, or even if we can't reach a student who has a referral in because they're next for one of the spots, how do we find ways to get them back into the system to get back on track? And then lastly, serving youth that are transitioning from correctional and treatment facilities back into MMSD. So many of you may have heard of the Metro team, and we have 4 amazing staff members doing that work, led by our Justice Involved Youth Coordinator, Christy Foreman, and really thinking about, again, how are we providing outlets and ways for students to get back on track for graduation that traditionally, before Ricardo brought this work forward in the district, serving Opportunity Youth was kind of in the fold, and what some people would say was often times being forgotten about. So that's a little bit around who we serve. So the Office of Youth Re-Engagement, one of the main things that we pride ourselves on in the office is innovation that leads to graduation and beyond. Oftentimes, many conversations around Opportunity Youth historically have been solely around graduation. For us, we know that it's not enough to just think about students and their trajectory solely within the school system, but like where will they go and where will they end up, and knowing that oftentimes they don't have resources in the community, so we want to make sure we support them while they're here with us to not just get that diploma, but also start preparing for life in the community, whether that's college, career, and or community advocacy and support. We are community-based. And thinking about a lot of the work that we do, we know we can't do in isolation with just the school district. We really know that we have to build foundational relationships with the county, with the city, as well as with the families that we serve, so that we can be responsive to the needs of students. And thinking about that word responsive is very important to understand and realize that we strive to make programming and create opportunities for youth, not in service of youth. So if we are trying to create things that we feel are based on our titles, based on our own personal experiences, we know that historically that has not worked, and has the reason why we have the Office of Youth Reengagement in the first place, really trying to bring that family and that student voice to the center as we do our work in our office. And again, innovative. One thing that my program coordinator reminds me of all the time is innovation doesn't always mean building a rocket ship and flying it into space. It's thinking about what are we currently doing now that we can actually do a little bit different to meet the needs of the students who have not been served so far within our district. Advocacy, coordinating resources, partnering with community, vetting programming, creating new opportunities, and ultimately have an impact all fall under the umbrella of the Office of Youth Reengagement. So thinking about our current high school programming, we have what we call recuperation options, and then again, we'll talk a little bit later about the micro school with West High School. But with their recuperation options, we're looking at options where primarily our juniors and seniors who are off track for graduation, who would not have no other option toward graduating in our district without having these partnerships that we have in place through the recuperation and get students basically ramps toward graduation. So we have Gateway, we have HSED with Madison College, we have Omega, and we also have Operation Fresh Start. So I do want to publicly say, right, that I'm going to show the slide coming up in the next few slides. One is an overall macro view with the total numbers, and then breaking down by each program, knowing and just remembering that we take in about, right now, last conversation I had, almost 200 referrals this school year in terms of opportunity youth looking for spots in our district to have the needs met. And as you can see on this next slide, based on what we have now in spots, we got about 97 students currently being served. So there's still 100 plus students who are quote unquote waiting for MMSD to create opportunities and or provide ways to give them those ramps toward graduation and preparing them. So here you see a breakdown by gender. You see we have the counts by race and ethnicity. Counts lower than 7 have been suppressed for identity and privacy reasons. And then you also see who we're serving in terms of students with disability and students without disabilities. So breaking down each program for the recuperation options, Gateway to College serves 10th through 12th grade. Right now, our MOU with the program is sitting at 29 students per rolling cycle, right? And right now the current enrollment is 32. And this enrollment is as updated as last week, Thursday, the 27th. And I want to make sure we talk about this rolling piece, because as you see, when we move forward to say HSED, right, where it's like 10 max seats, but right now we have 8. 2 students have graduated, and we're working through the enrollment process with the other 2 seats for HSED program based on that interview process, going through the referrals, who's next on the list, again, talking about reaching out to them to ensure that they, can be reached. And one thing, thinking about Will, our out-of-school youth coordinator, this is where his role kind of steps in, where we get, each week, or each cycle, we get emails, I can't reach so-and-so student, can you help support us in finding this student, because this is their spot that we're trying to hold, but we all know if we can't reach them, we can't find them, then we keep going to the next student in the referral list. Same thing with Omega. After graduations and this new referral, we got 7 current enrollment with a max seat of 10. And OFS Legacy, thinking about semester 1 graduates, we got 38 enrollment currently with a max seat of 47. Before we move into the micro school piece, I'm gonna ask Rosalina, our student from the micro school, and Crystal Hendricks to join me up here at the table. So Nope.
Go ahead.
Yep. Thinking about the history with the micro schools, for us, I want to make sure we understand and say, right, that although this work has been living in this pilot phase for the last couple of years of trying to pilot it with one school, then we had to learn from it, now we piloting it with West, that we are fully aware and understanding that we are truly having not just an impact, but really starting to see what work can really take place in our district and the success that we can have if we take the time to slow down, build something that's not only just productive, but meets the needs of our students and tailored to them, as well as taking into account the things that they need, that they are impacted by, not just inside the walls of a school, but outside the walls of the school. One thing we oftentimes talk about is that there's this sense of urgency to meet the needs of students. And I oftentimes tell our students and our staff, you know, I have no problem like deflecting that away from them, because I want them to actually do high quality work all the time and not feel the pressure. Oh my God, what are we doing for our youth in our district? Yes, we got Black excellence. Yes, we have, you know, our achievement gaps in those pieces. But again, we haven't even really been operating this office in 2 years. And we talk about urgency. Like, I don't think there's anyone in this probably city who can say they have more urgency to do the work that we're doing than the team of folks that support the work that we're doing. And as we continue want to talk about this micro school, I just want you to keep in mind that we're actually talking about young people who, again, without a different opportunity, would not have success in school at all. Spring of 2017-18, we had a pilot for 9 weeks, fourth quarter of that spring. At that time, I was an assistant principal at La Follette High School, and I was asked to be able to, I was blessed to be able to support the work as like the lead administrator for this micro school pilot. That pilot served 13 students, grade 9 through 11, and it was from that pilot that the office with Ricardo and Alex Fralin, the Office of Youth Reengagement, became a thought, and then it was continuous, numerous conversations around the office, what was its purpose, who was going to serve, and then ultimately in the fall of 2018, the Office of Youth Reengagement was created, and I was blessed to become the director of that office. And it was that work with that pilot, serving those 13 males in that school, that really gave shape to let us know that the micro school model as an equity strategy could work, and has led to what we are now experiencing in the 2019-20 West Micro School this school year. So again, the pilot was with La Follette, and one thing that Ricardo and Alex and I talked about a little bit is wanted to make sure, for the sake of data and thinking about having a framework for options for students that could work throughout the district, was wanting to know, at this point we had the east side pieces, we wanted to see, okay, how will we implement something like a micro school in the west side of the city. At that time, schools put in proposals to the office, to Alex as well, and had conversations with Alex as the chief of secondary schools then, and then from there it was landed last spring on West High School being the school that would get the micro school pilot that would be the extended pilot. So again, that 9-week pilot, well, the pilot was only 9 weeks, where this one is throughout the course of this 2019-20 school year. We're often asked, what is the essence and what is a micro school? Smaller, student-centered, culturally and linguistically responsive, co-created with students, where innovation, personalized learning, and family engagement remain our top priorities, while also understanding that we need to be flexible, adaptive, and focus on the social-emotional learning of students, while also prioritizing academic growth. As Crystal would call it, you know, it's not like one is, the social-emotional is higher than the academic piece, but it's like a 1A, 1B. We're very aware that if our students are not feeling that they belong, or having their needs met, and feel like schooling spaces are not places where they belong, they then will suffer academically. So we always want to make sure that we are prioritizing their social and emotional well-being in our academic spaces. So the West Micro School was formally launched November 4th, which is the beginning of quarter 2 but that does not erase the fact that the work I already kind of walked through. It started in the spring of 2019, and then first quarter was very much heavy foundational work with family and community engagement around the students. Anytime in our district, there's oftentimes a negative connotation toward alternative programs that exist outside of our schools. So one of the things that we had to talk through with students was, before we even started discussing a micro school for you or a space, we want to know just essentially what's happening in the comprehensive high school, what things you feel like you still need, what things have been successful, and then building our model solely, again, based on that student voice and what they said they needed and wanted in their academic learning environments. So we really talk about that student-centered, built in collaboration with students, focus groups happen, and then one-to-one conversations with the teachers, with the social worker, with staff at West around what this space would need to be for them to actually be successful. When identifying the 22 students that operate at, who are currently enrolled in the micro school at West, we used our early warning data tracking system, so looking at GPA, 3.0 or higher for juniors, looking at some behavior data, looking at 2 or more F data, attendance data, as our data sources. But one thing that stood out for West that they wanted to actually try and figure out how to get their arms wrapped around was credits toward graduation, right? So at this point, we take, instead of, it wasn't just, there's this narrative around who are the students who are causing trouble at West and we need to get them out of the building, understanding that that's not what this work is about, nor will anyone in our office support the work of essentially marginalizing students more and oppressing students more in the learning environment. So with the prioritizing of graduation and other factors, ran data, landed on 22 students that met this piece from the sophomores and juniors who became the cohort of students at the West High Micro School. We also had 3 staff members, regular education teacher, special education teacher, and a social worker. From our learning from the pilot, we knew then that having a full-time regular teacher to collaborate with a special education teacher in that space was key. And the students at the pilot oftentimes mentioned the need to want to have somebody not just there to talk to them around academics, but really whenever they felt like something was going on that they were bringing in with them outside the space into school, they wanted to have somebody trained with like a social worker background to be able to do that work with them. So that's how we landed on the 3 staff members for the work. We mentioned earlier with the introduction to the Office of Youth Reengagement that community partnerships is a huge piece of this work, and knowing that if we really are going to wrap our arms around opportunity youth, the things that they're dealing with and what they face in our society is bigger than just school, and community partnerships, not just only for the resources that they have, but also space and aesthetics of spaces for these schools to be appealing for students to feel like they actually get something more than what other spaces have. We knew that partnering with the Boys and Girls Club was a no-brainer. We are in the Taft location. I'm not sure the last time any of you have been over there, but in terms of teen center, recording studio, you got actual classroom spaces, have computer labs over in the space, you got the gym, essentially anything that they would have in the school, they have that and some. And in addition to that, the Boys and Girls Club has a Be Great graduation mentoring program in which supporting our students around the things that they need one-to-one related to graduation and providing mentoring around those pieces. And lastly, just to speak about the Boys and Girls Club, our students have access to the memberships and any other pieces that other community members and families have access to. Our students' families have access to those resources as well. So we did a lot of talking around what we're doing and the work. But I think one of the things I'm excited about is that from the advocating for this office and the need for why these different spaces should exist, we actually are now having data to back up and support the work that we're doing. So when we're looking at this attendance data for average attendance from quarter 1 to quarter 2, you'll see that from the quarter 1 attendance, and remember, we got 22 students who were enrolled at West from quarter 1, 72%. The quarter two attendance for their first semester in the micro school jumped up almost 10% for attendance. In conversations with Mike Hernandez, Chief of Secondary Schools, one thing he pointed out was that typically in high school, one thing we don't see is that attendance as students get older goes up. It's actually an adverse effect where it typically goes down. So we definitely want to celebrate that. And thinking about some highlights from this data, 16 of 22 students have seen increase in attendance, and out of the 16 students, 11 of those students have seen double-digit attendance increases. And we could talk a little, Rosalina talk a little bit about her experiences and how the micro school is working for her. The highest growth in attendance for one particular student was 33% in a quarter. So when talking about actual days, that's more than a day a week that she's actually attending school now than she was first quarter at West. Thinking about longitudinal comparison, we wanted to kind of do an apples to apples comparison. So from quarter 4 at West and now quarter 1 and quarter 2 at the micro school, there are 19 students who actually was at West and now at the micro school. So obviously you see there's 22 total students. 2 of those students were not in the district. 1 was not at West, it was actually at East. So just so you can see the longitudinal comparison, this data shows 19 students who were in both spaces. And you can actually see that each quarter, even starting with quarter 1, we started engaging students around what this design was, what schooling could be, what it would look like, how we want to build this space for them. Attendance went up, and you actually see for those 19 students, there's an 80% increase in attendance for quarter 2. Again, quarter 4 to quarter 2, almost a nearly 10% increase in attendance. We wanted to highlight a little bit around what we're doing intentionally in the space to get to the attendance piece. During quarter 1, as we mentioned before the launch of the micro school, there was heavy, intensive student and family engagement. We wanted to make sure we ensured students and their families that we were going to do everything in our power to build the best possible learning experience for their students in this space, and that they were going to get not only the experience academically that they deserve, but also the social-emotional piece and also thinking about life after high school. Many of the families work, as they think about the students in the micro school space, we're concerned about, okay, they're going to graduate, what's next? And there was a fear there, so obviously the idea of designing a space that not only prioritized academics, but the social-emotional piece and where students would go after was huge. And then, like I said, also in quarter 1, that intentional relationship building with staff. We oftentimes in our schools talk about how valuable relationships are, but for me to actually see the time and energy that the staff is putting in to building relationships with students, starting through that quarter 1 space before they even entered into the space, I knew then that, you know, the results that we're seeing now was going to happen because we thought the foundation of student success is built on the relationship between staff and students in the academic space. And then at the micro school, prioritizing relationships among students and staff. We do interviews with students each quarter around kind of what's working, what's not, what are your goals, what barriers are getting in the way. Almost all of them mentions the smaller flexible learning environment is contributing to why they're coming to school. It's this idea that people are here who will work with me to give me what I need, keeps me coming back. One-on-one check-ins with staff, and then this explicit value and restorative practices, and to also ensure for the students who in their mind, which thinking about it being a practice of indigenous folks of color, to not see their initial reaction to restorative practices and having to reteach what restorative practices and restorative justice is really about, really putting that practice into play around students that when harm is done, we work with you side by side to make sure that you get what you need and make sure the community gets what it needs. Not, here's the process, here's a circle. Students were very hesitant with that, but then actually seeing that restorative practices was built into the culture that actually has them enjoying and coming back to school where they feel like I'm actually being welcomed, not excluded. Credit attainment. So again, one of the things that West wanted to make sure we were tracking and working toward was graduation for students, and if you don't obtain credits, you cannot graduate. So what you will see here is that in quarter 1 at West, 20 to 22 students accumulated 15 credits. So and then thinking about the West model, like 3.5 or 4 if you're taking the class in the morning before school starts, the max you can get in the semester. So 50 students earn 15 credits quarter 1. Quarter 2, they earn collectively 26 credits. Longitudinal, thinking about the 19 students, are just again the semester to semester piece. 19 students in semester 2 at the comprehensive high school earn 19 credits, and semester 1 at the micro school, 38 credits earned for those students. And again, underneath you can see the work that we're doing around frequent conversations with credit attainment and goals, interdisciplinary lessons and assignments, having actual assessments where students realize it's not just about completing the assessment, but it's actually like what are you getting from it and how will you retain it has been important. And this idea of focusing on mastery and the redoing and reteaching and redoing until you master it, not just completing assignments for points. It's also contributing to that credit attainment in that space, along with our 11-to-1 student-teacher ratio in that space. So, enough talking from me. It was actually interesting to see when the students in the micro school space learned that we were going to be in front of our school board talking about their experience and what was happening. They almost forced the teachers to have an assignment to write letters to you all. So before I actually let them introduce themselves and speak a little bit, I did tell students that I was going to bring in some of the other voices of the students who are not present here, just so that they also know that their experience and what's happening at the micro school also holds value as well. So before you guys talk, I'm going to read some of these quotes from students. Here people work to get to know us. Like if we're having a bad day, they tell us to go to the teen room or something and take a break. They take time out of their days to make sure we're good. At West, our old school, they would say school comes first, but here you put yourself first. You speak what you feel without getting judged. At West, I didn't think so much about myself. I was thinking about everybody else. It was like I was in a bubble where everybody else was first, and I could forget about myself, and I would feel lost in class like I didn't matter. It got to the point when I was in class, they didn't even call my name anymore. So I would just pay attention to my friends in the hallway. Here, if you're off one day, they can tell. It could take, there being West, it could take days to see you not being yourself. Here, you walk in and they see your whole mood is changed and they see this isn't you. They check in to see what you need. On a good day, everybody's on the same page. With no arguing, we do something to get our energy out. We don't like falling behind. When somebody is off, if they need to talk to somebody, we want them to. So when we asked some of the students, what is it about the micro school that keeps you coming back? It's very flexible and personalized. People take time for you. If you don't understand, they don't get frustrated with you. They help you one-on-one. If you have a topic you want to learn about, you can do that. You can bring like personal things into your topic. We get things done. Our pace. Miss E was one person who cared at West. She picked me to come to the school. She saw I was slipping and skipping classes. It's not an alternative school. It's not for bad kids. It's not a game. It's a second chance. You can't play with the second chance. It's an opportunity to change. At regular high school, you can't let your guard down. You go in with your guard up and come out with your guard up. You don't get judged here for what you wear or your makeup. So I will let Rosalina introduce herself, followed by Crystal introducing herself.
I'm Rosalina. I came from East High School my freshman year and ended up switching over to West because East wasn't working for me. Been at West since second quarter freshman year. When I heard about the micro school, I asked to be in it instead of Crystal asking me to be in it. I feel like I was disengaging myself from high school period. I was never really there as much as I am now. As you can see, my attendance went up 33%. I feel like it's a smaller environment. I can focus on not just myself, but graduating on time. My face is getting ready to feel it. We have more one-on-one help with not just Crystal, but the social worker and other teachers from West. I feel like I'm still connected with West on top of being in a different building. What else? And then our teachers, them being colored teachers instead of just one color, I feel like we're all connected with them more because we can relate to them instead of just relating to one person. Our assignments, projects, and guest speakers are things that we care about. They connect our family with most of the things that we do, so I feel like everybody's connected, not just us as students. That's pretty much it.
Okay, and my name is Crystal Hendricks, and I'm a first year, this is my first year in the school district of Madison, so I come to Beloit, from the Beloit School District with 20 plus years of teaching experience. So I've had a lot of years of traditional teaching. I just want to start by acknowledging our programming coordinator. I just have to say this and get this out first. Ms. Megan Buckner. I know that without the training that she is providing myself and my co-teacher, Miss Allison, students call us by first name, that there's no way that we would be able to break the traditional mindset that I've become accustomed to. So I just want to put that out there first. And also to our director of the Office of Youth Engagement, Mr. Echols. I can't tell you how wonderful it feels as a black educator to have a black leader that I'm working for. It's very liberating, if you know what I mean. Okay? So I'm just going to get that out of the way first. All right, so this experience, I really feel blessed to be in this position. I feel like this allowed me to grow as an educator. Again, I come with 20 plus years of traditional teaching experience. That's all I knew. But something inside of me just never really felt right about that because I couldn't be my authentic self. Or maybe I could have been, but there would have been repercussions for that. So in a sense, I feel like I was not being true to myself. And this has given me the opportunity to be true to myself. And in being true to myself, I can be more authentic with the students. And trust me, the students know before anyone else when you're being inauthentic. And they don't like it at all. So this helps us especially with my students, to form a deeper bond with them because they sense my realness. The curriculum, I can't say enough about the curriculum. The design thinking that we've been learning from our programming coordinator, Megan Buckner. We thank her all the time, cannot thank her enough for helping us to learn how to design and implement curriculum that keeps the student at the center. The student is always in mind with the curriculum, the way it's designed and the way it's carried out. And at the same time, we're always allowing students to have their voice. We take their feedback. We solicit their feedback on an ongoing basis, daily. Okay, well, what don't you like about that? Or how can we do that differently? How can we do it to let more of your voice come out? So we're constantly doing that, and that is because of our training from Ms. Buckner in this design thinking approach, where the student is at the center. Also, as a woman of color, being my authentic self, I feel that I'm better able to service these young women of color because I know that it's going to take a lot more than just the traditional curriculum to get them through life, the barriers that they will face not only as women, but as women of color. And I can't teach that through the traditional curriculum. But being in this position allows me to help them learn how to navigate what I know they'll be facing and what many of them, like Rosalina, are facing already. So that's part of the liberating part. Like I feel like I'm really being true to myself and true to them, really giving them what they need, because many of these girls, they could be my daughters. And that's how I look at them, and that's how I treat them, and that's how I want them to feel and to go forward in the world, knowing that they're special and they can do whatever it is that they want to do. Again, I think I'm so glad to be in a district like Madison too, because the district that I come from, we don't have anything like this, the Office of Youth Reengagement, where they're actually looking at seeking these students who have become disengaged and what paths can we offer them to bring them back in, to re-engage them. So I just want to end with, I do feel very blessed to be in this position. I thank Mr. Echols for, telling me about the position. I thank him for finding Miss Megan Buckner, however he did. And I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you. Before we kind of open it up for questions, just a little bit about kind of what's on the horizon and thinking about the future of our office, where we're trying to go. One thing with the elementary and middle school is we're really trying to ensure that we start targeting students early, and when we start noticing practices that may be supported by research related to disengagement, how we could creating tier 2 support groups for youth, as well as kind of increasing as family engagement then to really do the work early on, so that our office is not just reactive in nature, but really doing proactive work before students get off track toward graduation when they get to high school. We also thinking about, as we try to hire more staff of color in our district, and really focusing on like Black excellence and this idea of putting Black students at the center of our work. And as we're doing this hiring, thinking about retention, how are we increasing the capacity of building-based staff, thinking about staff of color, student service staff, and student and family engagement staff, where we find staff of color in these roles. Just thinking about my conversation with Tremaine Clarity, or Dr. Clarity, around we get folks in, but then where is the level of support for them within those roles, regardless of where they come in, whether it be behavioral support, whether it be teacher, counsel, whatever, to keep not only ensure that they get what they need in terms of their role, but still see paths of growth within our district, but they don't get stagnant and stuck in one role, which has an invisible tax of itself. And then also thinking about, when we increase that capacity, how do we use that capacity building to uplift building-based support systems and professional learning of staff within buildings. For high school, programming. Just thinking about what more hope in the future for the office, what opportunities to explore and design more innovative programming. You see the data, you hear the voice. Obviously, our opportunity youth are being positively impacted in our district, and how are we going to create more programming opportunities for them before they get off track. Kind of from its onset, and really supporting the group of youth that we know we still need to support who are off track. There's this piece of, I'll tell anybody that we're doing the work in our office, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job. Ultimately, we should be getting ahead of this before they continuously come in these roles and being just as involved before they get off track for graduation, before they drop out. Creating partnerships within the schools to have these re-engagement teams. Like, we talk about students that are labeled gifted and talented. We talk about students with disabilities, but how are we prioritizing and having those same level of conversations daily around opportunity youth and prioritizing their needs in our schools. Continuing to learn from the West High Micro School model, and thinking about how do we support comprehensive schools to build out models like this in support of opportunity youth in their buildings. And then importantly, as we talk about our contracted services and thinking about the money that's being spent on contracted services, how do we continue to learn from our partners and the great support and collaborative partnerships that we have to then increase our own capacity in-house to build our own internal programs to meet the needs of opportunity youth, where instead of just solely relying on contracted services, we can rely on the contracted services who are doing the great work and meeting outcomes, as well as continue to grow our own programming opportunities for students within our district that we can service. I kind of pause, right? Because I think about like this slide, what's on the horizon in the future for high school, and like thinking about if given the opportunity and the agency and the trust that we can do this, and it may look different, it may feel different, we want it to be different, like to what it would look like to be able to have that autonomy in our work and be able to do these things. I just can imagine the opportunity, opportunity that exists for that. And thinking about, lastly, what's possible, and when we talk about this future for opportunity youth in Madison, kind of building on the motto of the Kingmakers of Oakland, born out of their Office of African American Male Achievement, really looking at culturally responsive classes. We're doing the Black excellence work. You got Michelle and the folks that she's partnering with doing amazing, great things, but to really like pour into the brilliance of these people in our district trying to do this work to be able to create things like this.
country, black children, black people, black consciousness, the black physical body, the black spirit is under daily assault and daily attack. And so we posit if we focus and are intentional and apologetic around the needs of black children, it actually will empower and engage all children and all families.
One of the big questions that is asked within the curriculum is, how do I see myself? And schools oftentimes give an answer to black boys. See yourself as having a Black History Month. See yourself as in the lower track classes. So for us, this is not just a job. This is a necessity.
We can predict educational outcomes based on your gender, the neighborhood you live in, and the ethnicity. That is racial inequity at its finest.
It's important for people that do this work to come with that same sense of urgency.
I know we will have moved the bar to the next level when public schools across the country actually move beyond 10th grade ethnic studies courses or Black History Month to literally rewriting curriculum in this country.
When you see a young king understand that he's not an N-word. When you see a young king understand his potential, where you can see how bringing out black genius works.
Now is the time really to lean into these institutions and rewrite a whole new narrative.
We just wanted to be clear that this is about the love of black boys. This is about the love of our children. This is about giving our lives as best we can to create a new world for them.
Black boy, better listen close. When your elders speaking, better have the most respect. And I'll teach you how to get it. We ain't always gotta act like opposition. No, I got the wisdom, I'ma share it with you. If my life a movie, what you in the picture? If I got some time, I can kick it with you. Chop it up, tell me what's been on your mind. Part of my asses, we back on the grind. Get in the truck while I'm up on behind. Break it out, barriers one at a time. I'll give you the game, the street is fine. And for greatness, don't settle for fine. Men on a mission, don't step out of line. Vision is vivid like me in this prime. I got a dream, you'll send in divine. Peace in the streets, no peace for police. Mom and pops in love, check cash, everybody. Work hard up, resume on fleek. Got my passport stand for the limits. Every move that I make ain't average. Come now, king, let me sign you up. Built a whole castle for you to run. Fresh put the file there, we can have a right here like hate, race, pride, what I bring. What I speak is in my veins, in my genes. Right, wrong, stand strong in the scene. What you mean, I can. What is hate, race, pride, what I bring. What I speak is in my veins, in my genes. Right, wrong, stand strong in the scene. What you mean, I can.
So again, with what's possible is that the inherent brilliance and genius of our young kings and queens can be seen not only by us who feel it, but get into a place where their educational experiences uplifts that thought process for them, that this idea of education is second nature. They see it as a necessity, and they see it as something that is not just trying to be pushed on them, but something that they know is the embodiment of greatness and the greatness for which they come from, and also knowing that it's that mentality that oftentimes inhibits that exact thing in our schools. And the question is, how do we continue to not let that be the case by supporting who they are, how they want to show up, and it's providing teachers with the opportunity to be themselves and provide the students through academic settings, students being able to, again, focus on themselves and not have to worry about all the other pieces and feel seen and valued. And as we think about this work and our district money, right, and if the data and the words that we see have heard today is not proof in terms of what this micro school model is as an equity strategy and closing gaps, honestly, I sit here as a director of the Office of Youth Engagement saying I don't really know what else you would need to see. And as we think about moving into our March operation work group meetings, in April we come to our operating budget meetings, it's my hope that you will kind of see how we're operating as an office, where the funding is coming from, and start thinking about how do we support, when we say equity and this equity work, not put the work of the Office of Youth Engagement, the work of Black Excellence, the work of any other things that we're doing in this district to try to close these gaps and give every child the opportunity to be college and career ready, that we know that equity means exactly opposite of equality and different. So as you think about our numbers, as you think about our size, as you think about who we serve, as you think about how many staff members we have per pupil ratio, it's actually being okay with moving away from what is seen as traditional and what everybody say they need or should have, and really showing not just this office, not just this district, but this city of Madison, that we prioritize opportunity youth by putting our money where our mouth is. Thank you for supporting MSD's opportunity youth.
Thank you so much, Paris. Thank you so much for both of your testimonies and for taking the time of your days to come and speak with us and share. And please send the gratitude to everyone that compiled the quotes. I wanted to open up just sharing a few very hopeful by what you shared and what you're doing. I had a typical educator day today where you feel so sad by our data, looking at preliminary data of the state and having to reconcile to the fact that we Black students in Wisconsin are doing, that we are doing, that we are providing less opportunities for Black children in Wisconsin than the state of Alabama. And having to think about trying to be a state better than Alabama for Black children, or it's very complicated for me to have to ground myself into and to look at the data and support districts that are trying to find root causes. And what I heard from the testimonies and what you shared and what I can understand from your experiences is that there is this core root cause around being able to experience humanity in our schools, right? And have relationships, right? Which are things that are probably the lowest cost things that we can ever do in education, right? Everything else costs, a greater amount of resources, financial resources or time. The relationship is one thing that we are both hardwired to do as human beings, and we feel better when we actually experience that, and we can build a collective community when that actually happens. And to be able to have this sort of laboratory of experience, I think it's a gift to our community. So I really appreciate all of y'all's work, and I really appreciate your hope to continue to give us a chance. I know so many students speak to the second chance component. I feel like you're giving us a second chance to do better for you. So I'm gonna pause here because I'm definitely getting very emotional on that. I wanted to start by sharing with Savion and then seeing who else has comments.
So thank you so much, Paris and Crystal and Rosalina, for sharing your stories today. I remember it was about a month ago where we saw each other in the community. Paris, Crystal, and I all realized that we come from at least family tradition of really smart Black educators from Beloit, now here in Madison, so it feels really great. And another point is I work with Will at the Odyssey Project on Wednesdays, and he was telling me about work he's doing in the Office of Youth Reengagement, literally knocking on doors, finding students, meeting them where they're at, to figure out how we can better serve them. So one question I had was, in your presentation you talked about moving beyond deficit thinking. Can you give a few examples on how that has improved our systems to meet the needs of students and serve students better?
Yeah, I was thinking about, the micro school, for example, right? Oftentimes, when students come in to the system, we have this canned approach around what schooling should look like, what it should sound like. it's masked in this. We're trying to get you prepared for life after high school. In reality, we say we can't prepare you for your life after high school without us getting to know who you are, what you want to do, who you want to have impact on, what things are you facing in your life constantly all the time, and realizing that those things are part of their lived experience, and then building off of that. I think the deficit pieces, when you start thinking about white supremacist culture, is like things have to be a certain way, have to sound a certain way, you have to act a certain way, where we dispel a lot of the students and say, if I'm getting anything else but who you are authentically showing up here, we gotta have a different conversation, because I can't help build you in the ways that you want to be built if I don't know who you are and see you as the great person that you are coming in.
Yeah, paternal racism is definitely a thing, and it's a shame that it's a radical thought that in education we can view students as autonomous people with hopes and dreams as well.
Thank you for this update. It's really exciting to hear all of the progress that you've made since the last time we chatted, which I think was maybe just at the end of the La Follette experience. I'd love to hear you talk about scaling. I think we were kind of in an experimentation mode and a little bit still are. I think there's very clearly something really amazing that you're building, and help me understand, what does that look like in a constraint-free world, right? What does that look like when you're addressing our 400 to 500 opportunity youth? And what is kind of regular and systematic? So is there a school that looks something like this in this location every year that kids can know to come to expect? Or is it rebuilt every year based on who the students are? How are you thinking about that? Again, in a constraint-free world, where would you want it to be?
In a constraint-free world. We have this emotion that we do. It's just literally not have to build off of the foundations of things that already exist. I think in a district like Madison, it's hard to build something up like this while also fighting the system that created the exact thing that we're trying to change, right? So even the fact that it's called, even the students are working on the name right now, the fact that it's called a micro school itself, again, that's like, the lingo and the language that was brought, but not saying that that's, it is what it is with that, but when can we take a group of 8th graders and say, we want to design your high school based on the things that you are interested in before you even step foot into high school, and then have to find either you're going to sink or swim, and if you sink, then you got to wait till, again, this is our work in our office, and we're trying to figure out how to make it all work, and then you got dollars and cuts, but wait till your junior year or senior year and say, okay, now you're off track, and now we got to try to find, again, we got 97, 100 spots, and we got, depending on if you include our students in the metro population, again, 400 to 500 students who clearly need something else. So I'm thinking the constraint-free space, it would be, I don't know if it wouldn't have to be built every year, because it'll be built upon what students have shown us before they even get to high school, where we're building for them based on who they are, what they need, but also got to catch you up on credits. I'm imagining what this space would look like if credit recovery wasn't a thing.
I would say.
Thank you. My next question was actually for you, so just come on.
Next question is for you.
Please. I was just gonna say, in a constraint-free world, to answer your question, it would be practice, not program. It wouldn't be an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the solution. It would be embedded within the schools. Because right now what we're doing is retroactive programming and having to undo things that have been done for the last 16, 17 years. And the fact that it's just a switch that these These young people just need to know that they are cared about and adored the way they are. When I first met the girls, the first thing that came out of my mouth is, I don't care about what you become, I care about who you become. And I think starting with that builds the program itself. Because the who is going to take them beyond, right? The content, because let's be honest, Google is about to wipe out all the teaching content, right? Like, kids can look up what I don't even know viscosity is, right? But if I can't, as an educator, help you to use that thing on how to think, then what's the point of all this? So it's more about who they become and how they think and moving forward. Because I think for so long they've been taught what to think, knowing that in their hearts of hearts, back to Crystal's point of this doesn't feel right, it's not me, it's not authentic. I'm not trying to make cookie cutters. I'm trying to, because we ain't seen what happened to cookie cutters. Like, this is society right now. I need change makers.
And I would say, one thing she did say, I would say people would, when you hear a teacher and student talk about this amazing person right here, you would probably ask the question, why won't people hear her voice or listen to her in terms of what she wants to put in place or how to improve their comprehension spaces? It's like a fight to even, again, we don't neglect the fact that we know that we still black folks doing this work for black and brown kids, and that itself comes with a level of scrutiny and questioning and doubt and whatever else that means. So it's also a piece in terms of a constraint-free space. It might not just be dollars in the district. It's like constraint-free for me to be, I can come be Pear's Black Brilliant self with his Black Brilliant team supporting Black and Brown Brilliant youth, and then folks will see us as the way to do this work, not just you go do that over here, but don't dare try to come and implement something that'll change this overall structure. I think that's also a constraint-free space.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that, and I think, I mean, the reason I asked the question is if that's the goal, if that's the vision, then how do we take a next step next year or in the next couple of years? I mean, we're in next week going to talk about the referendum and operating a referendum and pieces of that as how we invest in kids. What's the bridge from here to there that isn't kind of taking a next step from where we're at? Because where we're at is really good, and you've done a lot of work each year to rebuild up 2 different schools. How do we kind of systematize some of that so that you can grow, and if growing isn't the same thing we're doing now, but rather a direction towards what you just laid out, then maybe that actually looks different in terms of what the work is. So I would encourage you to think about, 4 or 5 years from now, where do you want this to be, and paint the path for us in terms of pragmatically, what do you need in year 1, 2, 3 to get you there. I think we support what you're doing and would like to arm you with the resources to make it bigger. So my next question was actually around curriculum. I think you spoke a little bit to that, but can you just talk a little bit about what the curriculum work review, it was named by everybody here,
Yes.
so.
It's not as many people. Essentially, so it's a design-based thinking curriculum in which it uses the things that we understand and know traditionally, but applies it to what students want to learn and understand. So yes, they're learning chemistry, yes, they're learning English and how to write a complete sentence and all of those things. All of those things happen in a very different looking space. I call it organized chaos. Because when you walk into the room, they're not always sitting like, at those desks that you see with worksheet, and then turn to this page and read from here to here, and then answer the questions on the back, and then only one person does it, and everybody copies the rest, right? We all know that story because we probably have our own. But it's more of, so for example, in this project, they studied and researched chemical elements. like understood the history. They did their own research, and then they created these templates and these tables to basically create their own chemistry table. We've done labs where they've been more interactive, where we've learned with like regular household products without like blowing up the building or anything like that, but also understanding that a lemon baking soda has the same reaction as carbon dioxide and an acid, right? So it's that application of that, it brings it to a place where they can attain, but also seek to be better. The things that they're learning are also embedded one within the other. So, for example, back where I'm from, and I'm sure here, most cultures and ethnicities in history are taught as electives, whereas we bring it back into social studies because we are all the same people. So we're taking I don't know how many courses, and we're learning about all of it. And we're applying that to English, because English is at the core of all that: reading, writing, speaking, communication. And then we're embedding in math. And math is embedded in different kind of ways as well. So it's interdisciplinary in the sense that they want to talk about food. Okay, let's figure out how to create a project on food. There's also this interest in creating their own business, so now we're working on how to create a project using business strategies and writing a business plan so that they have something they can take with them in addition to learning the content.
Lord. So I think Kate covered most of my questions. I think just to follow up on back to budget and one of our primary responsibilities. How do you, when I first came on the board, I was right in the middle of the controversy around the micro schools and, taking students out of the regular, schools and take them out. And I think at that time the board made a bold decision to move forward on this, which was great. And so how do we continue to invest, right? And I mean, that's up to us, right, to continue to invest and scale up despite, right, what we hear from oftentimes from a community that does not want to take kids away from our schools. And that's reality, right? We will get that. And I think that I like the transition, looking like having a plan to how do we transition this way of working within our regular school day, right? But that has to be very intentional, and I'm really concerned at this point in time to even think about how that would look and that what that would do if that takes away from this special, right? How special this is for our students. And so I agree, we need to continue to invest, scale up, and be very, very intentional to like really put our budget, right? Like you said, I think you said like put your money where you're, it is, we have to, right? We have to move in that direction. But we are getting, we will continue to get pushback from some segments of our community on doing this. And I really like the numbers that you're showing us. We're showing progress. And both the quantitative and the qualitative data, right? Hearing from our students is really important. And so I just want us to be prepared when we get into our discussions around our budget and referendum, that we're thinking about this as a board, right? As an effort. If we're going to talk about Black excellence, that we have to put our money into Black excellence. And this is part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's part of it. So it's not really a question. It's just something for you to consider as we move forward through our budget discussions, and how you can help us frame and give us the information that we need to support this.
And just real quick, one thing as you were talking that popped in my mind was that a different conversation is now happening. Like, obviously, when you launch anything brand new, you have an idea of like what it should be and what it should work. The Office of Youth Re-Engagement, we should have these 1-year micro schools, then ornament back to traditional high school. And I think what's happening now, I think it's time to actually take a different approach and understand a narrative where before you had a narrative where quote unquote staff and buildings, which made the micro school seem not desirable, like students are being pushed out, right? Where now we have students, and Crystal will tell you about the conversation you had with 2 students from the micro school today who don't want to go back. So I think now, after 2 years of doing this work, the conversation now shifts to how are we again, going back to this proactive piece, what will we be investing in as a district and creating where students can elect into versus needing to have some after the fact because, you know, again, they'll tell you the smaller space and environment is part of the reason why I'm successful. The flexibility is why I'm successful. The smaller ratio is why I'm successful. So it's when we get past any naysayers around, quote unquote, well, who's getting what dollars and all of that to, they'll tell you. It don't have to be from us, and it got to be from staff. The students will tell you themselves what it is they want and need. And then I guess the question is, will we actually listen and create it?
Can I ask something? Yes, please come to the microphone. Introduce yourselves. Can you both introduce your names to the... Oh, Megan Buckner, Program Coordinator, Office of Youth Re-Engagement.
I'm Damaris Droindia Rieta, and I'm a microschool social worker. What I want to tell you is that we have social and emotional learning happening in our microschool, and it's important. It's a healing pathway. And I think of it as going to West, we were selecting students that needed the most care. And we brought them into our space to receive that care. And we're seeing results. We're seeing the healing taking place. We have partnered also with people from the community, like Miss Jana here. Jana is one of our partners bringing in mentoring for Black girls to our program. We're teaching them about forgiveness and now helping them know how to put that into place so that they can make decisions that are good for their own lives and what that looks like through storytelling. So when I think about the discussion that's happening in this board, I hope that you also consider how important it is that we are actually treating the psychological and emotional needs of our students and helping them their wellness, because they have had terrible traumas and they have had circumstances in their home lives that are difficult. And we cannot even begin to imagine what that looks like for each one of them because they each have their own story to tell. But the work that we're doing is addressing it, and it's important.
So I think thank you so much for coming up and saying, because I think you came like full circle of all the aspects of like needs of the school. There's, what I've been hearing from some of my colleagues is that this thinking or this inquiry around how to grow this program. And what I'm hearing from all of you is to say like, how about this is the way of being, right? And so I don't know if any of you are ready to share some of the thinking, or if it's the next step is like give us, and I know you're requesting 50,000. I feel like that is, you know, I'm just gonna be really, that doesn't feel like enough to actually, you know, begin to even
operationalize like what is it like school could be, you know, and maybe you still under this sort of laboratory part of it to protect the integrity, and that gives you some flexibility to do some testing, you know. But you have demonstrated both from like a student's perspective, this is the most diverse teacher body that have spoken to us. You also, I heard also sort of your own recruitment, right? This relationship to also recruit, you know, diverse staff and also retain diverse staff. So like, which is something, we talk about all those things disconnect. We talk about students disconnect from teachers, we talk about, disconnect from system. The way you are weaving all those pieces together, to me, is very inspiring, and is the innovation around going back to the root of indigenous teaching and learning, right? And so what does it look like to spill over into our high schools and our middle schools and our elementary schools as a way of being? And so my question is it a decision from us to say, like, we do want you to, like, dream what the 2-3 year plan could look like for this, imagination without constraints? And what is the implication from budget and staff and support? My other question was going to be around, are there policies or laws that prevent you to be what you want to be, right? Or that you could imagine, right? Share with us your imagination around, like, what we could be as a school district. I'm just gonna leave that, like, as a potential question, but I'm wondering if anybody has a question or follow up on this. And then I'll open up to, go ahead.
I'll speak in a very concrete way, right? Right now we're in a place of, when we think about where this money has initially started from, with, innovative temporary funds from a superintendent who, say, well, I'm going to put this money to the side, and I'm going to grow out this pilot out, and we're going to see what's going to happen. And again, the level of respect I have for these amazing people, like, to take a chance on, well, I'll take it personal, me, in this work, knowing that, like, the funds that you are actually being paid from are, tiered, that's a risk, and it just shows the commitment to, like, what people have for the youth we trying to serve. So I'm thinking, like, again, to your point about what we need, right? Isn't it a future where, we're able to do the direct recruiting that we have and actually provide the spaces and resources for folks to do this work? Again, with the motion of, we don't have to think about, like, the foundation and framework that we know have not served all students well, but actually saying, well, we know what does serve students well, so let's create a space that if those founding principles are the norm. I think that's, I think about little things like professional development, right? Like, to go back and forth around what folks need. At some point, not to toot my own horn, but I want to ask, like, we're doing this work, we're trying to design this, when can Paris voice actually say, no, this staff needs this? And then other folks just say, okay, cool, you do what you think you need to do. It's stuff like that works, and right. And again, me candidly speaking, right, like, I gotta ask the question, what does race have to do with that? It's deep work, right? So, like, the money, again, yes, the money would be great to create these spaces, have an opportunity to keep folks, but I think there's still an inherent deeper piece of, even with that, can folks still be innovative and do the different work without being questioned in a way because it looks different, feels different, and it sounds different.
Ananda, can I respond to what you just said, just briefly?
Nikki's been wanting to talk for a minute. So,
Go back to it.
Nikki, and then Ali.
I was gonna, okay,
Yeah. And Savian, and Kate, and Chris. Okay.
Just really quickly, sorry, gotta use the mic. Really quickly, one, thank you for your work. I find, as someone who does learn differently and always has, I understand the need in that. Also, I do worry about it being in a separate space. I think I like the school within the school model. Maybe that's me. I think it should be included in the curriculum so students do have a choice. But I think it should be in the school building because I think it legitimizes it. Maybe I'm missing the point, and it may very well be. But I think you should be treated like every other program that we have, because you've definitely earned that right. And I don't use that lightly. I don't say that lightly. But I also know that it will give it legitimacy and it'll give it some structure. Additionally, I would like to, what Kate said, to see a plan on what will happen in the future in 2 or 3 years. Part of the reason I voted against the first micro school was there wasn't a plan. It was too rushed. It was decided within 6 weeks. I couldn't make that kind of commitment with only 6 weeks' notice. I can, if I have some time to see it, to digest it, to understand it, but I wouldn't be able to do it in a rush time frame, and I don't think it's fair to you for me to rush that decision either, because I want to do it right, but I don't want to make anyone wait either. So if you could get that to us, it'd be wonderful.
Thank you, Nikki. So, Kate, you had something.
I was just going to respond to kind of I think you were trying to kind of summarize the request around dream big, right? And you tell us what you need to get there, and it's our job to figure out the finances of can we support that. I just wanted to comment, we've had this experience with one other program since I've been on the board, and it's our Catholic Charities work, behavioral health work in schools. And each year we asked for bigger, more, because the results were so tremendous. And each year we got told, no, we can't scale that fast because it's not the right thing to do for the integrity of the program. And if that's the answer, that's okay. So don't let us push into a space that isn't comfortable for retaining the talent that you clearly have been able to source, and the degree of impact and kind of relational experience. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's a fair answer. And don't hold yourselves back because you think we don't have the money. Right? Let us solve that problem, or try to.
Chris, and then Ellie and Sadie. So I first want to thank you, like everyone else has done. This was really great to hear what you guys are up to and to meet all of you. My first question kind of builds off Kate's question about curriculum. I know that DPI offers multiple pathways to graduation, and you were very clear that graduation is one of the goals of this micro school. I wondered if you could say more about the pathway or multiple pathways to graduation you're envisioning for the students in this program.
Well, currently, under our current model, right, we have like a disjoint, like, you know, we collaborate very closely with like Cindy Green and our office around like our recuperating options, where as it was planned before, students would come in early, kind of have this 1 year of regrounder and recenter, identity work, building academic skills, and then either fall in back to the traditional school or one of these programs. This year we're operating with the, under innovative and alternatives umbrella. We're able to, think about what does that look like for credits, and time spent on classes give us, again, the opportunity to do some of this interdisciplinary work. Then also think about just leaning in. One thing that was not mentioned, where Melanie Thiel from West has, secured these teachers of records within the West School, so having an actual staff at West working closely with Melanie to then help support the standards and the curriculum based through the credits, right? So obviously, as the micro school continues to operate in quote unquote, I heard piloted, or I think somebody said lab, that language as well. But regardless of what it is, until it's actually woven into the fabric of the work, we will continue to live in the. We get you in. Again, it's hard to you say think big and scale up 3 to 5 years. It's hard to think about like a graduation plan for students in the track for students to graduate when we're solely trying to figure out, okay, like where we going? Do we plan for 3 years, or do we gotta wait till next year to see what's gonna happen with this before we then decide what this is gonna be, right? It's like, obviously now we're having conversations around, okay, 10th graders who are in the space now, looping in to potentially 11th grade, right? Just even changing when we're hearing, again, that student voice being centered there. Like, if you are saying you want to potentially graduate from a space like this, then how do we create that space? But again, I guess to answer your question succinctly, without really, it's hard to like plan a true graduation track outside of what was originally proposed with the office. Go back to your school or connect to a recuperation program without really knowing like how much time we would have in longevity to do the work.
That's helpful to hear, thank you. My second question is more kind of bigger and abstract and may not be easy to answer, but if you look at the PI25 data, we've got about 80 opportunity youth in 5th grade, or we did last year, and the number's about 280 by junior year. has there been any thinking about, like, you know, we're doing interventions at the high school level to try to support kids who've reached this point, but is there anything we can do to, like, prevent those 200 students from being added to the opportunity youth list between 5th grade and 11th grade?
I mean, one thing we mentioned in there, we talked about like what's on the horizon for middle schools and high school. Then I showed the Kingmakers work. When Michelle and I have been collaborating for the last couple of years, we took a trip to Oakland and actually see this in action. Again, how do we create these essential learning environments, which also is, folks also forget that the foundational piece of spaces like that is that these black and brown youth are being taught at 4th and 5th grade by men of colors, you know, who are being supported in their roles, whether it be behavior interventionists or whatever, which we do have in our schools, to have a path toward getting that teaching degree to then be able to embed themselves in that space. So in thinking about how to support it early is thinking about the preventative work of our curriculum, who are the students in front of, how are we addressing the needs for students to see themselves represented in the curriculum, to see themselves as scholars, right? Like that's a huge piece around changing how even our elementary schools look and like the opportunities that we create. And we can't create the opportunities without actually having the people to do that work. So that's a whole different conversation around recruitment, grow your own type programs, things of that nature.
You know, when we're talking about investment as a board, to me, I think it's really worthwhile to think about how do we invest in our youngest children or in elementary and middle school children so that we don't reach a point where we have almost 900 kids in high school who are labeled as opportunity youth, and we just have resources to support a fraction of them.
And I also want to add, like lastly, when we took a trip to Denver to look at some of the micro school spaces, and one of the places actually was an elementary school, and they talked a lot about how do we as educators begin to have these real conversations with families as young as 4th and 5th grade around. Right now, our data says there's 80 students. This number increases by high school to 280. We need this, you know, this is what we're trying to do to close these gaps. We need you on board. What are your goals and dreams for your child? This is what it takes to get there. We're going to support you there. Like that's not only a school thing, but also a community piece around how are we wrapping our arms around families to really understand what's at stake here and the urgency with their youth. Because oftentimes, when we were talking to folks in Denver, what they said was teachers are hesitant to tell families what's really going on, and they hit them with the line, oh, he's only in 4th grade or she's only in 4th grade. They have time. You know, and the reality is if staff are afraid to interact with students and their families, how can we get them to have real life conversations around these real outcomes and what's at stake around their child's education?
So Ali and Sable.
Yeah. So I want to start by thanking you, Rosalina. Thank you for coming and speaking with us. I want you to know how rare it is that young people are actually at the table when a presentation is happening and participating. And also the number one fear in America is public speaking. So number 2 fear is death. People say if there's a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So it's a brave thing to come and talk about your experience. It's a vulnerable thing, and it takes a lot of leadership to do that. And we're the beneficiaries of your story. So thank you very much for being here with us and speaking with us. I greatly admire this work and this presentation. Because I think it's incredibly necessary to provide options that work for young people and to think outside of the box in terms of how we best meet the needs of our students. I also think it's a rare thing for folks to have their team up and to give so much respect to the folks who are in the classroom doing the work and supporting the work in the classroom. So I greatly admire that. The first time I saw you present, you showed us a clip of Tupac, and I think that you have not gotten far from that in terms of bringing in radical sources of celebration of blackness, and also, you know, allowing for us to lean into our potential, allowing for us to question ourselves. I think there's a thing we need to consider when we talk about the cost of this, which is the cost of the alternative. And one of the things I really loved about the way you presented your data is that you compared your data to what's happening within our schools, right? So often we go, are you succeeding? We go, well, are we succeeding? And how do we succeed to a greater extent? And how do we succeed to a greater extent together? I think that's a great question to ask, and I think that same question can be asked when you talk about resources. So if a part of the group of Opportunity Youth is young people who face incarceration, I think then we need to talk about how much it costs to incarcerate a student versus how much it costs to allow for a student to have a meaningful education within a micro student, because the taxpayer is paying either way, right? And so what you're talking about might seem really expensive from the school district perspective. However, if the alternative is incarceration, there's no way it's coming even close to that price tag, right? And we have to be able to start thinking about when we're willing to spend more money, particularly on black students. We'll spend $100,000 a year on a black student to incarcerate them, right? And then act like $13,000 or $19,000 is too much when we're talking about an education. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities to have a real perspective of how important this work is and legitimately how affordable this work is. I love that you brought in the inspirational piece around the video, and one of the things I would hope to see generated is that sort of imagery around what y'all are doing. So what does it look like for us to feature y'all, to highlight this work, to emphasize this work, to document this work in ways that are meaningful and accessible to our community? And I hope to support y'all in doing that. My primary question is around scale. And I will say, as a board member, it's rare that I get to talk about the things that impact black students with other black people, even from this seat. So it's a real opportunity for me to get to have this conversation with y'all as well. But in terms of scale, we've heard often that there are waiting lists for these programs, that it's competitive to get in, that students realize that there is another option to being in a high school that isn't working for them, and don't find an access point readily available because the need is larger than our ability to accommodate the need. So how many Opportunity Youth do we have that would qualify for these sorts of programs in comparison to the number of students that we're actually serving within these programs? How many young people are currently on waiting lists for Omega, for the micro school? And how do we make sure that the students who need it are getting it? Because I think that's the place to start in terms of scale.
So, again, when you combine, right, like I look at 2018-19 Metro site numbers, you have 150 students, right, in terms of this Metro. So like that's the population Opportunity Youth. You have, then you see on those numbers in terms of what we're serving now, 96 students. And then when you talk to Larry Palm over at Capitol in terms of the worker referrals, you have, he said what's up? 200 something, right? So again, it's like legit 400 or 500 students who need the services. I guess one of the things that we've been doing this year heavy along in our collaboration with Cindy Green is we are paying many programs to meet the needs of our youth, and quite frankly, just like we as a district are referending and looking for money, some of these programs also come to us looking for money, but we are also saying that, which I think part of our work and the advocacy of the Office of Youth Re-Engagement is that we can pause and ask the question around, are we meeting metrics? What does success look like? Our students actually, it's more than just that degree. So I think, again, to your number piece, when we first started in 2018, Ricardo was like 450. That number has not changed in terms of the direct recuperation programs and then Metro, but then I think we also forget that any student in our high school currently who is off track for graduation is quote unquote an Opportunity Youth. So now we're talking about thousands of students potentially, right? Where if you think they're going back to 5th grade, right? We measure most of our work at the high school level in terms of graduation, but then what would it look like if we started actually putting data to actual students even in elementary school in terms of what we see, right? Who are not meeting competencies and things of that nature.
So looking to how do we become more proactive and less reactive, and then really looking at what does it mean to fulfill the immediate needs of the students who are kind of most at risk. I'm sorry, there's a lot of language that we've used to describe students who we are failing as a school district or as an education system, that put a lot of responsibility on the student or the student's family. And so I apologize that it's hard to get out of the habit of terms like at risk, right? But how are we looking to the students who have kind of the most pronounced need and making sure we're meeting that need, and how are we identifying that?
And I'll just say, like, and I want to make sure I say vocally, right, that me saying these different numbers is, it's not a lack of, like, not knowing the 400 to 500 number. It's just very hard for me to think about the way we quantify it currently now is the 400 to 500, but when I'm out in these spaces and we having these conversations, that number is exponentially larger. So it's just hard when you say, like, what's the number of students like that we need to serve right now? It's hard for me to say 400 to 500 because it's more than that.
Right, and our data would point to the vast majority of Black students need something different than what we're doing right now, right? And whether or not that's coming out of your office specifically, or how we're working together to do that, how we're using your office to inform best practices throughout the district, I think is another way to have this conversation. So how do we share this labor? Because I think one of the other things that happens is that we see folks of color in positions of leadership absorbing a workload that is overwhelming and that is unachievable, and that creates a pressure cooker that you can't be successful within. So what does it look like to share this work and see this work impact and influence every department within the district? And I'm like, that might not be a question for you. I'm like, that might be something that we all need to take into consideration, including us as a board.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what's so great about this is that it doesn't necessarily examine the child or the person that we define at risk. It examines the society that puts them at risk. And so when I think about engagement, there is a disengagement, which is another way to say disenfranchisement. And what you have done is you've made a school in the image of Black and brown kids. And in the interest of turning program into practice and living this out in our everyday schools and talking to students, are there common themes in which they express that this did not work for me in school, that we can change our practice on in our schools in the interest of being proactive as well and sharing that labor and sharing that work? Are there current things in our current school systems which are deficit-based thinking, which disenfranchises students, which puts them in that space of being, or which puts them in the space of society placing them at risk, that we need to address? Is the work that we all need to think about.
So I'll come to you, Nikki. I'm just looking at our org chart and seeing that neither Mike or Jane is here, and we also are in transition to getting a new superintendent pretty soon. But I do want us to kind of put it on the deck of what, as we reimagine, like, as we're asking for, the sort of collective reimagination of what schools could look like, as you spill over into our traditional schools, like the thinking and the practices, what does it also looks within the organizational structure for that work to be both elevated, to be supported, to be well compensated, to have resources and whatnot. I think that, when we specifically like elevating our commitment to Black excellence means that we think about dismantling to the degree possible those structures that prevent Black excellence from actually showing up, right? So I want to just to kind of put that on a queue, Lisa, for us to kind of think about, like, over the summer, what would that look like? Nikki?
Two things. One, Barb, happy birthday again. She, our secretary and basically assistant for absolutely everything. I felt she needed recognition. Ali, thank you for getting the flowers. And additionally, my question is, how do we increase the seats? I've heard a lot. I met with Omega twice last year, and Oscar Morales twice, about he wanting to expand and there still being waiting lists, is there, can we get and find out how much of a waiting list there is and how we can increase seats?
We have, again, right there's a formal process for like the referrals that get submitted, and so that those numbers are there. I just want to reiterate again that before we just solely think about it from a numbers game and perspective around how many students need seats, let's create these seats. I just want to like our office is solely about, are we actually putting students in spaces that actually is not just thinking about the degree or finishing school, but what type of learner are you becoming, not necessarily what degree you walk away from. So, you're never going to hear the Office of Youth Re-Engagement say, like, no seats for kids in spaces. But before we start thinking about that, part of the role of our office that the board actually voted on was vetting and making sure that what we do have is actually high quality and providing students with the necessary things that they need, which means, as we think about our MOU process and our quarterly meetings with different entities that we work with, how often are you meeting your metrics and how often are students growing, and how can we see in real time what that data looks like and how are you tracking that data. It's a lot of pieces that go with, again, it's the numbers and seats. Like, again, yes, it's urgency, but jumping to just put students in seats for the sake of urgency and numbers may not be the best thing for us to do. Yes, ma'am.
I understand that it just didn't come up as when Oscar was saying I could reach more kids is why I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you, Nikki. I think what I'm thinking is that we also need to do like a collective work around reimagining what is possible, right? I think we often are trying to also fix, and we wanted to throw money at the thing that might be working and then like not thinking, what are some of the consequences or unintended consequences to things. So I think it's important to do some of the work, and what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that the support does exist collectively, right, Anika, for this work. So I'd love to do some sort of offline, more thinking about what does it look like. I know that you are, there's going to be something queued up for the operations work groups, so we can actually expand that and continue to have this conversation around both the structural support, human support, and what is it looking like to open that space for that reimagination to happen. So thank you so much for all of you for being here. Thanks for all the work that you all do. Thank you so much for bringing the voices from the field. We really appreciate you both being here. Thank you for all your work, and thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate it. So, yes. All right, let me get myself together here.
Permission to take 2 minutes just to stretch?
No, we have one more thing. So let's take it 5 minutes as everybody is already getting up.
I just didn't want to do it until you said it.
appreciate like how the energy have shifted. We really needed that good piece of news. So next, excuse me. We're gonna be looking at the updates for the bullying policy and some of the changes. What we're not gonna have today is the Title IX, and we're also not gonna have the mandated reporting policies part of this because we wanted to give a little bit more time, and we're gonna be reviewing that in May. Correct, Lisa? So, all right, are you ready? Yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourself
Yep.
so folks know who you are?
I'm Bryn Martina. I'm the Coordinator of Progressive Discipline, and I'm in the Department of Student and Staff Support. So you have the slides, and so I'll just hit the high points, but this is just as requested, a high-level overview of the district's work around bullying prevention and response. And then we'll finish up with a few recommended policy changes for your consideration as a board. So this is just, always like to have a little context of where we are. This policy has been in place since 2010. The last update to the bullying policy was almost 5 years ago in May 2015. There's a report linked in there that's also on board docs from 2016 when research had done a survey of students and teachers about what was needed, and I think the work that we are doing reflects a responsiveness to what was raised in that report. This is way too much text for one slide, and you all already have it, and I will not sit here and read it to you. But just wanted to point out really the way we're talking about bullying, and that's in keeping with, national recommendations about how to address bullying, is really focusing on that sense of safety, belonging, community. And so that's something, obviously, that's a strong part of both the behavior education plan and our bullying policy. So there's a lot of school-wide programs and practices. Many of them live in our Department of Student Staff Support, many live in other, but some examples are welcoming schools, Second Step, developmental designs, restorative justice, those types of programs and practices, trying to create that positive school climate where bullying is not acceptable, where we have a strong community and bullying doesn't occur in the first place. And that preventative work is really, really powerful. Also the foundational practices that are outlined in the behavior education plan, that's that framework of creating that safety and belonging for all students. And that's the really important bullying. It's so much bigger than bullying prevention, but it also does cover bullying prevention. And I do want to highlight actually just one thing right there at the bottom of that, which is that those universal practices provide that framework where we can prevent bullying behavior and also where we can support students if they do engage in bullying behavior and students if they are targets of bullying behavior. So it kind of lays that foundation. Some of what we do just to provide information for students and families, we've got the public-facing website, little summary of what's on there. We want to continue to improve the website to give families more specific information about what they can expect, particularly in terms of the supports for targets of bullying. And we have training and support for schools. We've got training directly for schools and support and consultation as needed. And then we've got a staff-only website with more detail about the sort of more process-oriented, how do you handle it when bullying is reported, what are the steps to take to investigate, follow up with all families and students involved, things like that. We're working right now on an enhanced training to really try to weave together this preventative foundational work, the universal practices, the foundational practices, and then the sort of technical aspects of complying with the bullying policy, responding to reports of bullying, and so that these things aren't seen as distinct, but we really can weave it all together for schools. And we're always trying to ensure fidelity to the training and guidance that schools get. So I'll just, this is the policy piece. So obviously this is up to you all as the board, and we have gone through and made a few recommendations. Do what you want to.
Thank you.
People are excited outside.
So board policy 4150 covers, the board's anti-bullying policy. So currently all schools have been trained on this policy. We continue to reflect on how to provide better training and supports on policy and practice. As I mentioned already, the policy was last revised in 2015. So we've looked at the policy and have some recommendations that I'll just quickly talk you through the red lines, but really where comparing our bullying policy to both DPI model bullying policy, our surrounding districts, and the other large districts in the state, as well as research from like National Academies Press on what makes a good bullying policy. We have a few recommendations, and sort of the key one is really adding this section specific to supporting targeted students. There's already a section in there titled Intervening with Students Who Engage in Bullying Behavior, which is really where I think as a board, where MMSD is really at the forefront of talking about not labeling students bullies, talking about intervening with students who engage in bullying behavior. That's so critical. And then there is language throughout about the supports to be provided to students who are targets, but it doesn't have its own explicit section. So that's sort of the key recommendation, is pulling it so that that language falls under a clear section, so it really shows that balanced work that we do in schools, but that the policy reflects that. I can take questions and then walk you through the actual red lines, or would you rather?
Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Okay, Nikki, is it about what we have already seen? Okay.
Well, it's technically about a red line. I just questioned on the policy change and why we took away, we're taking the appeal rights. Do you want me to wait?
So Bryn, you're gonna walk us through
Yes.
some of the things, so
Okay.
just hang on for a second.
Yeah. So, are we able to pull up the red lines, or I know you all have them, so either way is fine. Yeah, so really the context for looking at the policy was making sure that it reflected that balanced work that's being done. But since we are making recommendations to improve the policy, there were a few things that we wanted to recommend to you all for your consideration. So there's not that many red lines, so I'll just sort of explain each one. One is just changing victim to target, which is just more consistent with the appropriate language here. That's pretty straightforward. Then taking out, we have the definition of bullying behavior that I think schools and students and families are pretty well trained in. There was other language here that really we don't see being used. I think it was put in originally with an intent to provide a richer definition, but I think sometimes when you have more language in policy, it can actually make it more confusing. This is language that also really lives in our harassment policy, which exists, and this policy also points to that policy later. So that's why we're recommending just taking out this extra language and keeping that clear definition that everybody really has been deeply trained on. If we scroll down, it's in the same vein. There's no requirement, or really not necessary, and it's not sort of consistent with other policies to define these particular terms. I think it only risks confusion to have that extra language in there, and so that's why that's recommended. Under prohibiting bullying behavior, the red line there that addresses that bullying behavior will be addressed consistent with the behavior education plan, that language is also later. So again, just trying to streamline the policy and not have the same thing stated slightly differently in different parts of the policy. That's why we're recommending taking that line out. And then, sorry, Ananda, do you mind going back?
No.
There was just one line at the end of prohibiting bullying behavior that I wanted to make sure I explained why. That the impact of these actions are felt. It's just changing it to these behaviors result in a substantial disruption. That's just more consistent with First Amendment law around what can be sort of addressed in the school environment. Yep, so then if we're going down, right, yep. So the reasoning, the suggestion for taking out the appeal that's explicit to bullying, is that we have, no other policy has an appeal specific to bullying decisions. So we have our RFA process for parents, students to raise concerns. This adds a separate appeal process that no other policies have, the model policy doesn't have, other districts don't have. And again, I think it can lead to confusion where there is already a process for addressing concerns with actions of the school. So that's why that suggestion is here. Again, it's sort of streamlining and not having an extra slightly different version of a process that already exists. On the supporting students, so that's really sort of the key addition here. We tried to keep it pretty focused and to keep it sort of parallel to the other language about intervening. Obviously, there's so much that schools do. It's hard to capture it in a small, a few sentences, but we did add we suggest adding a specific sentence that says, in the policy, it already said that schools must take steps to assist the target of the bullying, and then adding in specific language, we recommend adding specific language about including but not limited to developing a safety and support plan, and that students and families should have input into the development of the plan. That's work that's already happening, but we felt it would be important to call that out in the policy. Would recommend that the board do that. And then the other language was really just pulled from where it was elsewhere so that it was clear, here are the supports for a student who's targeted, and here is the support to intervene with a student who's engaging this behavior. So that's all we have.
Did that clarify? Yeah, Nikki.
The reason why I brought it up on the whole appeal thing and why it's as important is someone who had extensive bullying that turned into physical assault and a restraining order to be able to attend middle school because students tried to throw me down a window while on a staircase. I'm rather sensitive to this process. And my question is that I know there is a policy on how things are done, but I always saw bullying as a separate from other policies because parents could get confused of, does this qualify? Does this fit under harassment? Is this just merely words, or is this really creating a substantial environment and a substantial disruption? That's my only reason why I brought it up, because I'm afraid that not having it, parents will think, oh, there's nothing I can do.
And we certainly don't want parents to think that. And perhaps a line saying, any concerns about the resolution of a bullying complaint can be raised through, and then we can refer it to the other complaint concern process. I think that's a great point. So we could submit a revised red line with that.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Gloria?
I think you might get into it later. I think you might get into this later. But, about policy and practice. You'll get into the practice part, because I see it all, I
That wasn't the plan, but.
it wasn't, okay, it is great to have policy, right, to guide the culture in our schools, but I think the issue of bullying really gets to the practice of how we are prepared as a school culture, teachers, staff, to respond to these incidents, right? And really with what am I trying to say? Really with not only the person who's conducting the bullying, but also the victim of the bullying, right? How do we support that? And I'm glad that we are including that language in this policy, because it was really focused on the person doing the bullying and the disciplinary and all that. So I'm just really wanting to figure out how we can practice this, right? And so that,
So let's get one more question, and then maybe
we'll talk a little bit how we're gonna frame the practice component to the question. So Ellie?
Yeah, so it's hard in this conversation to kind of exist within the multiple hats that I do, because I work for the Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools. And so we talk about bullying and harassment and expressions of power within education on a very regular basis. And one of the things that I noticed seemed to kind of consistently be missing was exclusion or group-based bullying, right? So what does it mean when an entire class says they don't want to be this one person's partner? What does it mean when one student always gets chosen last at gym? What does it mean when one kid is perpetually left out? And one of the things that we realize within our work is that when a student is left out, or exclusion as used as the means of bullying by an entire group or an entire classroom, the risk that that student behaves poorly out of desperation for attention or affection or friendship rises. So a student who has no friends and sits alone at lunch gets told, you can sit with us at lunch, but would you mind giving this bag to this other student? And gets charged with selling drugs at school, right? Or this kid gets told that they can be friends with this other group of kids if they're willing to get into a fight with a certain kid, right? So those kinds of dynamics in which the actual social reality of school is leveraged against a student. And I think that we like to think of bullying as kind of these one-on-one interactions, and don't really look at kind of the full scope or power dynamic of bullying. And I think if we were to look to how do we intervene or notice and recognize exclusion as an aspect of bullying or as an aspect of harassment, I think we could do a lot of really healthy preventative work in terms of building communities. And so I think some language that empowers us to have an expansive relationship with a scope of harm that allows for bullying to exist within our schools would be incredibly helpful. Outside of that, I think the changes make it a far more coherent document.
And I can address both of those quickly too, because I think there is that, the practice part is everything, definitely, and that's slide 3 with way too much text on it is supposed to capture all of that practice that's going on, and I think a lot of that work, and especially what we are doing with the training to really try to integrate the technical aspects and the really preventative culture and climate, building that sense of community, that work is really in line with what you're both talking about what we need. And some specific examples of that is some of the actual slides and teachings from Welcoming Schools about what all the different ways that bullying can manifest. We do still have in the policy one line about examples of bullying behavior include but are not limited to the following, excluding someone from a group. And so it does, it at least points to that, but then the work that we have to do is really that training and support for schools so that they understand the full range of what this can look like, and then truly how do we
and I don't want to not acknowledge that line. I just don't know if that line actually lends itself to recognitions of. Thank you.
No, I definitely hear that.
Kate and Chris. And Ron. So hold on a sec, Kate. Anika.
It's my turn. I kind of have a similar question. So, I guess based on my own personal experience, it's really hard to report that you're being bullied, I guess, and speaking against your own peer because of those power dynamics, and also it's just a really uncomfortable situation. So I guess what training exists for adults or teachers or other people who are able to recognize that, to be able to see the forms of bullying and recognize that a student is going through those experiences.
I mean, I think you hit on a few things. One is, I think there is one thing that's important in policy that was added in the last round that is still there, is really calling out that there can't be any retaliation for reporting bullying by, against anybody, even if someone who sees bullying reports that if there's retaliation against that student, that needs to be addressed, and that itself can be a form of bullying. But also, how are we making sure that students have sort of safe and anonymous ways, right, to share? I think that is addressed in policy, and then that's part of that training for adults. And I do think some of our programs, like Welcoming Schools, lay out how to keep an eye out, for students where that might be happening. And I think we can continue to learn from you all about what you need that, makes you feel safe to share that with adults. So let's keep talking about that. Thank you, Anika, for that question. So, and I know you also put a link for the reporting in here that could also be online, and anyone can do the reporting. But how long has been this online reporting been up? Do you know when is it like a long time ago? Has it always been there and I never knew? Oh, because this is the first time I'm seeing it. I know it's been longer than the time I've been in this position.
Okay. So I guess my question is like, how do we? I think there is a piece to Anika's question around the information to students and families around. Because I know when my daughter have experienced really severe bullying, her first ask to me was like, "Don't tell the teacher. Don't tell anybody." Right, and so I'm like in the space of like, how do I navigate this? So if there is how can we improve our communication around sharing with students and families around like that the staff can also just say like we heard from a third party, right? Yes, we did not hear from the student being bullied. We heard from a third party that this has been going on.
Right,
and
right.
Then who gets this report that's online?
Goes to the principal of the school.
Of whatever school it's at.
Yeah.
Okay, Kate and Chris.
Hey, thank you. So maybe along the same lines, I'm curious how many reports are made every year. How it's not actually in the 2016 report. We have percentages for different types of bullying, but there's no absolute number of just how much bullying is being reported in the district. Do you have any idea how?
I think we could get that. I wouldn't want to say anything off the top of my head, but there is a form that schools complete when it's reported in that way as bullying, right? And so we could look to that data. I'm sure that will under capture, and then we could.
I mean, I think that's actually the reason to do it, is to understand if the reporting system is at all capturing. We know it will underreport what's actually going on, but it just what's the scale of how kids are experiencing bullying and how families and or kids are being willing to report it. The second question I had, does this cover staff as well?
No,
or is this just
that's a separate policy.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. And then the last question, or I guess two, maybe along the lines of what Gloria asked earlier. When I read this as a parent, I kind of want to know like what actually happens after, because there's a lot of flexibility in response here, both as a person targeted or a person doing the targeting. And so I don't know maybe that's a affiliated document for parents of, are students separated? Is there an expectation of something that I could have for my kid, even if it's not rigidly in policy, that might help paint some solutions for families? So
that's a great, and I think that's where we're trying to go with that, is that, right, there are things on that public-facing website. I think,
I read that.
As a parent,
it's like just not quite practical enough.
Like,
I just want to know, is my kid gonna see this kid tomorrow?
I think it's a marriage of both the adding a little clarity to the policy to say, if your student has been found to have been a target of bullying behavior, you're gonna have a sit down, you're gonna have your voice heard in some safety and support planning. And so that would be, what we're suggesting to add to the policy. Then I think we definitely have to do more to communicate to families what exactly will that look like, while also allowing that flexibility to individualize that support. But that's where we wanted to go, and that's kind of on that slide 4 of, that's something we're actively working on, is getting input from families and students to improve that public-facing website, so they at least know a little more of, here's the range of things that will be considered, you know, here's
exactly it.
The type of frequency of communication you should expect from your school.
Just something, if you've never heard of a safety and support meeting,
Right.
you might have an idea of what the possible outcomes could be. Last question was around the electronic piece, and it's kind of an open-ended question of what's the best practice out there right now, I guess nationally, in terms of how to interact with social media and bullying. It's very open in here. What's your take?
No, I actually spent a lot of time looking at what's out there. I mean, the good news is there's a lot out there on cyberbullying. There are pieces of Welcoming Schools that specifically address that, but there's also some really fantastic national resources. That's part of what we're adding to that. This enhanced training for schools is a lot more there, and what I really like about it is there's there's a lot of different websites that we have. But we have been sort of sifting through those and saying, you know, these are the ones that we think have some really nice resources directed to educators, and getting those linked for staff and staff trained on those. And then there's also some really nice resources for parents and their students. And so that'll be part of enhancing the public-facing website, is getting some links there for parents and students, because there is a lot of good work being done to address it, and we can get it out there, I think, a lot more efficiently.
Thank you, Kate, Chris, and Sylvia.
So I appreciate the new section on supporting students who are targets of bullying. I think that's a really good thing to include. I would expand it a little bit to supporting students who are targets of bullying and their families. I've talked to families whose students experienced either physical or emotional harm because of bullying, and the family is integral in helping the student address that harm. And just going to a website and the website says, we'll do this in your safety and security plan, from what I've heard from parents, is not enough. They actually want to be able to call someone at the district and say, my child is experiencing this, and get some that they often feel blown off. Like, the district is like, well, we gave you this, we resolved it, and they actually want to hear, like, what's the plan for addressing the harm that was done to my child after the fact. And I think we could put something in policy just to solidify that the district not only supports students who are targets of bullying, but also supports their families in helping them address the harm that has been done. I also think that, this has been said in other ways before, but possibly expanding that support to students before the actual investigation and determination have been made. Like, you can have a student who, you've registered concern in whatever way, through the form or verbally, they're scared to go to school, but we haven't actually made a determination of whether or not it's bullying. As a parent, that's a horrible space to be in. And how do we, make sure that students feel safe while there's an investigation happening?
Or at the very least supported.
I mean, I would say, we could look at maybe 1 or 2 additional tweaks to address that, because I think actually that's definitely, in my experience, is something that schools are aware of. They're not waiting until an investigation is complete to offer support to that student, but it's a great point that I don't think our policy maybe reflects that, so.
Yeah, 2 questions. I did have one on social media, but do you think that it might be worth explicitly mentioning mental health supports in supporting students? And then the second one was, in the practice, is there, culturally relevant teaching is an ongoing thing, but things that can help teachers or staff identify culturally specific bullying type behavior that students, because they don't feel connected to staff for whatever cultural reason, and it's hard for staff to identify that.
That's a great point.
Thank you, Sylvia.
And I was just going to elevate Chris Carusi's comment on strengthening policy, because I don't have kids, but I have juvenile clients who have been bullied, and then those are the kids I keep seeing in the system who keep reoffending and reoffending, and it started with so-and-so was working on this, was bullying this kid, and finally they couldn't take it anymore, and I want something for not just the parents, but for the kids themselves.
I was thinking about that too, Nikki, how to strengthen that language around, and I think you did do that, like took out like sort of this perpetrator kind of harsh language on a policy, and I appreciate that. I think I heard the sort of expanding the sort of the social component of it, both from the students interacting with bullying because they've been bullied, and I love the idea of expanding to the support, this sort of multi-tier support to students and families, and others involved. So I have one more comment or question around really concerned with underreporting, in particular for students with IEPs. So I'm not sure if that's a practice conversation to how do we address that. I know the policy does not make any distinguish around if the students interacting with bully has an IEP, how would that be different? Or if a student being the receiving ending of the bullying has an IEP, how is that different from a both IDEA aspect, but also because there might be other components of things happening there. So those are my things. Are you good?
And I should say, I don't know, right, I have no idea for a fact if there is underreporting or not. I just know typically when trying to capture the full range of anything, our reporting systems, I think for bullying, schools have really been trained now around our bullying reporting, and are doing in the instances where I'm called in to consult or support, like I do see them really using that system, and so I do think, that is a good system for capturing things, but it's just, we never know.
And then, I don't know, because I know maybe just elevating the RFA piece, maybe just a refresher to all of us, maybe it's something that comes in a weekly, so we kind of get a refresher. I know that sometimes when we get emails from parents, we don't think about if you have this, we actually have a mechanism that that could address that if you haven't done that. So that would be I think my last comment. We're good. Thank you so much for your presentation and all your work done on this item. And this is going to be for our action item the end of the month, correct? Yeah.
If I could offer just one thing, as you think about this and take these notes home, maybe by next week, Friday, if you could have any other feedback that you think of, just send it in to Mike. We can be sure that we get it to Brynn and her team so that we incorporate your feedback into the final draft of the book. Appreciate your feedback, Jen. It's really helpful.
Sorry did you engage parents and students in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Again, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion